The Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpy website and in the link below, and enter the promo code ORGAME to get yourself 10% off. Okay, Michael Verney, we're back. We're talking hurling. We absolutely love it. Brought to you by Bamboo. Don't forget, as I just said in the promo video there, you can get 10% off the Bamboo hurley from Torpy with the promo code OurGame. How are you getting on, Michael Verney? Not as many big hurling matches this weekend, but we're still looking to get stuck in and give the butt of the hurley to each other.
No, there's definitely not. There's obviously only Division 3A group games this weekend, and Sligo look like they're already promoted, but there's so much to digest, I suppose, when you look at the league as a whole. So many different things that we learn throughout it, and like it's so different than under years. The proximity of league to championship, like you might say sometimes, oh, you couldn't maybe read too much into the league, but I'd say you can read a hell of a lot into it this year, because how much is going to change in that 2 weeks. We'll say that Clare and Waterford, Wexford, Laois, Dublin and Antrim, they've only 2 weeks, and the rest of the teams only have 3 weeks. So if anything, this is a more enlightening league maybe than any other season that we've ever had, because just given the proximity of the two competitions. So
league isn't just league this year?
No, not necessarily, because I'm just saying, like, if you're trying to turn things around and you've had a dismal league campaign, you can't just say a league is league and it's 2 weeks later, like, do you know what I mean? Because just how close they are. So I definitely think, and I'm sure we'll get into it, there was an awful lot you could learn and lessons that different counties could take out, and different things to say that we took out of it from what we think we're going to see from counties. It's not like I've even, when you're writing about it, you know, come summer, you know, you're talking about league and then you're saying come summer. It's not come summer, like, it's 2 weeks, it's now, like, do you know what I mean?
It's still Limerick flipped their form just in the space of a week in that game against Cork. So yeah, you don't know. I mean, like, we talked about Tipperary's performance last weekend, but is that going to change massively now when they come out in a couple of weeks against Waterford or Clare? We just don't know. But just for the viewers out there, as ever, we want to get you to be as involved as possible on the show. We'll bring your comments up on the screen. A few comments have come in already, because we're looking to find out what you think in terms of who's player of the league, shock of the league, young gun of the league, score of the league, disappointment of the league. You know, anything that stood out to you, get it into us. We're going to do a power rankings. We're going to look at the scoring averages in the league. I mean, we'll play a clip from Joe Canningan and talk about the scoring in the league we've seen so far this year. We're going to look at the London county final, the delayed 2020 county final at some point, the commitments at inter-county level, and so much more. There's so much to talk about. But just a few of the comments that have already come in. We've got Colin Cormican on Twitter. He said, best player, Brian Kincannon. Best score, Tony Kelly's goal against the Cats. Biggest disappointment, Dublin. Standout, at Shane Saint, never donned the tribe shirt. Come on, Shane, it's a healthy rivalry. It is a healthy rivalry, but, like, you know, it's Galway. You know, you're a neighbour, and, you know, I don't really want to wear your jersey. You know,
it could also have something to do with the fact that I have the Galway jersey.
Yeah,
so that might be something to do with it as well. To be fair, you have donned a Kilkenny jersey, which is, if anything, like, that's more of a commitment, I would say, to do that than to wear a Galway jersey.
Yeah, it hurts. Look, it hurts. But
and you've worn a Cork jersey as well from time to time too, which is worse again, I'd say.
Yeah, I hated Cork growing up. There's no point in saying otherwise. It was we're on the end of a few beatings there. And to be honest, the Galway colours, though, I don't mind that. Sure, my hometown, Burrislee, is the maroon and a little bit of white trim, so I wouldn't mind that too much either. But
funny enough, Shane, I always reckoned maroon was cursed. I went to school in St. Brendan's Community School. I did 7 of the best years there, and we couldn't, despite having unbelievable talent, we couldn't win anything. And it was almost like, by the end of it, it was almost like I thought it was the Mayo curse. I just thought, you know, Galway could hardly win anything in maroon. We couldn't win anything in maroon. Nobody could win in maroon. Westmeath couldn't win in maroon. But Burrislee have kind of booked that trend in recent years, and Galway as well. So it was probably just excuses.
Yeah, some of the comments coming in as well. Patrick Hickey says, are we going to deal too with your Tipperary bias? And I said, I'm not sure how it can be dealt with a laughy face. And he goes, what's bred in you always comes out. at Tan90 or at Twice as Nice 97, Tan97. Is there a book open on how many places too high Tipp will be? Obviously referring to the power rankings.
I would say two. I would say probably 2 places too high, I'd imagine.
And he followed up with, they can't run to the ball, but sure they can hit it nicely when it turns up near them. If lads marking each other were tied together with a bit of rope, Tipp would be favourites. So he's kind of tying, huh?
It's an interesting one, Shane, right? You've tried to play or tried to pay Tipp a compliment, but in my opinion, I think it's a slight against them that you've actually made. Fair enough, they're risky, but you basically said that they don't have pace. And one of the most important things, nearly more important than skill in the modern game, is pace. So while you've in one way complimented them, I think you've taken a swipe at them as well. Listen, maybe it's going to be fuel for them in training that, you know, one of our own is turning on us. You know, a lad who watched us training at some stage last year during the championship, and he's turning on us
and said
now.
Nothing about it at the time. Didn't give away any secrets of who was playing where.
I'd say if you had, you would have been excommunicated.
But is there a Tipperary arrogance? Because some people have suggested that my talking about Tipperary being so skillful that it's almost coming against them. Some people have taken that as a Tipperary arrogance. So would you level that accusation at me?
Oh, I definitely level it. Arrogance, level it at you anyway. Arrogance in Tipperary, arrogance in probably every walk of life, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, this is absolutely uncalled for. More cheek from the Offaly men with the Stockholm syndrome for Kilkenny as well, because that's the only thing you've got to hold on to in the last number of years.
We're back. Offaly are back on the road again, so that's all I know. We don't need to be concentrating on anyone else.
Well, we talk about the scoring issue that's been coming up recently. Before we move on to it, you've done a piece where you're looking at some of the stats. I'll just play a clip from Joe Canning, who I spoke to during the week.
I'd be the same. Like it's not easy. It's not an easy thing. Like even you look at frees, like fair enough. You're maybe your own 45, but there's a lot of things in. There's a wind in that as well. Like that's a skill. If everybody. I'd be worried if everybody could do it. Do you know what I mean? But not everybody can do those kind of things. Like I remember last year we played Tipperary down in the Gaelic grounds, and like I was hitting a 65 into Cardavan side, and I had to take a run in. Like I had to step back because the wind was so much. But then at the other side, obviously the wind was going the other way. So like things like that come into play as well in different situations in different games. So. I think we need to be more positive about it. Maybe it's just COVID or whatever that people are getting negative about stuff. People seem to give out a bit more about things lately than they ever did. So try and look at the positives, you know. Take it for what it is and try and enjoy it. And I think with crowds coming back hopefully eventually as well, that'll add to the whole thing as well.
I definitely agree with him on the point of the crowds coming back, but I don't think we can just simply ignore the fact that they're turning into free-taking matches, tennis matches, that it's a little bit frustrating. Like, how often is it puck out, shot, wider point, puck out, shot, wider point? There's not as many contests around the middle of the field, and that is what makes sports like Gaelic football, like hurling, AFL, whatever it might be. It's those contests and those fights and fights for possession and just see the heart of people. But what are your thoughts on what Joe had to say? And obviously he's fully entitled to his opinion. You have to listen to it if he's a top player for so long.
The first thing I thought was Joe's definitely out getting a bit of sun. He must be doing a few Camille Thai deliveries outside because he looks like he got scalded. But I think there's fair points in what he said. But I do also think, like, just say we're reporting at a match here now, and obviously it's difficult for us. But it's when you're doing that and trying to work in that capacity, you realize just how quick things are happening. Like the ball is literally gone over the bar, and like you could be writing down a score, and it could be a point at the other end. It's literally happening that quick now. A little bit too probably quick for my liking. The 50-50 battles are kind of gone out of it. It's more of a possession game now. So obviously, if it's more of a possession game, you're in control an awful lot more. I like when you're out of control almost, and you're delivering a 50-50 ball. From a spectacle point of view, if I was playing in a team, I probably wouldn't like that. But teams are holding possession now. It's a prize possession. And as a result of that, they're working shots a lot more. There are a myriad of factors that come into it. The weight of the ball comes into it to me. I saw Shane Dowling saying recently that, people saying that, the high scoring was to do with the weight of the sliotar, that was lazy analysis. And I don't think that's true at all. It definitely has a part to play. There's no doubt about it. The boss is bigger on hurls. The sweet spot is bigger. There's more halfbacks practicing out the pitch.
Can I make a point here? Sorry to cut you off, but just a point that, there's James Cahill weighed the slitters and all that, and that there was only like 0.1 of a gram, something very, very minuscule, something like not even worth talking about. But that doesn't mean that the ball is the same and travels the same. It's like two things can be the same weight and travel completely different amount of distances. So I don't think that carries the motion or anything like that. And definitely the hurleys, like some of them are definitely thicker than they used to be. And if you look at some of the old school hurleys with much smaller bosses, smaller sweet spots. I mean, I used the bamboo hurley and I was able to drive over 3 out of 5 frees from 100 yards at the sideline. So that just tells you how good that hurley is and what that's adding to my strike. Because I was thinking about it. I don't think that in the past I would have been able to get 3 out of 5 like on target, as in straight in line, because I'm not the sweetest striker in the world, as many people who know me will be aware of. But the 3 of them all went directly on the money and stayed the course. So the technology involved in making these hurleys is better now. And obviously players are stronger too. So you can say, it's the same as 15 years ago. But do you think the average player is stronger now than he was 15 years ago? I think in general, players are much, much stronger. And I know, like I've talked about this before, when I did a sort of a real personal training course over like 8-10 weeks or something like that to try and do a bit of an operation transformation in 2015. Like I definitely struck the ball way farther. And I remember one of the lads saying it to me as well. So if you're stronger, if your hurley is also kind of going to knock the ball that bit longer and have a bigger sweet spot too, surely the ball is going to travel farther.
Oh, 100%. And the rims of the ball are also probably a bit thinner than they would have been years ago as well. And that would obviously help it to it helps your touch, and it helps probably the ball fly through the air a bit better as well, and maybe keep its consistency a bit more. I'm sure you'll be able to bring it up, Shane, just the stats showing just how much scoring has changed in the league in the last 20 years. I think it's really, really interesting. Was in touch with Pádraig Ferguson from GA Lore. I just move in a bit closer to have a look at it, but just look, it's a 20-year analysis basically of points scored per game in the league over the last 2 decades, and it's really, really stark when you see it. So like in 2001, it was 28.5. So that's 28.5, you're looking at, it could be 111 a piece, or 112 to 111 or something like that. And now 20 years later, you're looking at 48 points shared between them. So it could be like 218 a piece, which is a massive increase. And obviously we saw the Galway and Waterford game this year as well, where it was there was 56 scores, 26 wides. I think it was 72 points combined. It was 312 to 311 at half time. Like that would have been a good full-time score 20 years ago. It would have been above average for a full-time score 20 years ago, and now that's a half-time score. So that'll just show you just how much the scores have moved on. I think the most interesting thing, Shane, as well, is if you look at 2019, the average was, I think it was 41.5, and it's gone to 48.5 in 1 year. By far the biggest jump of any accumulated scores in the history of the league. So it's gone from 41.5 to 48.5. So like we do tend to overreact and run away with ourselves. We're probably a great nation for it, but the facts do paint that point that the scores have drastically increased in hurling. Now it must be pointed out as well that this is, to my memory anyway, the first and only league that was played in summer and that was played in prime conditions. So a slower ball, slower speed, everything will be slower in winter. players probably have less of a pre-season done. Probably the pre-season is probably similar this time of the year, but the ball is moving faster. Like you could strike a ball over from 100 yards easy at this time of the year. In the winter, it's a fair effort to do it. Only the really, really good players can do it. But that's kind of another factor to take into it. But like a 7-point jump is a significant jump. Massive jump.
You just can't ignore it. Like you really can't. And I wonder also, like, are players going through training blocks that they wouldn't ordinarily be going through? So like that's combining it with the whole winter conditions that you'd normally get. Are players at the moment going around on like fast pitches and they're kind of jaded? And that, I think that does suit the forward, because you're dictating which direction you go. And if as a back, you're already kind of tired from heavy training, trying to keep into a lad is even more difficult again. A couple of comments in. Colin O'Donnell, have you a points analysis over that period of time to show how many of those points are from frees? I wouldn't imagine that would be available in GA, or it certainly would take an awful lot of time to sit down and figure that one out. But if somebody has it, please do send it in.
Just on that, Shane, like Pádraig Ferguson and Leo McGough and guys that go into the stats, they're providing an unbelievable service for me and you and any hurling follower, because like the GA does not have this of information readily available. It's basically guys that are GA fanatics that are putting time in and making sure that we'll have these stats forevermore. Like Pádraig Ferguson analysed league results in football and hurling, the Irish independence, since 1925 to come up with these stats. Like he came up with that David Tubridy stat recently, and he was able to, pull guys from Tony McTague from Offaly in the 70s and show that he was fifth of all time. Like this is just guys that are just doing it because they love it and want to have the information there, and it's so important that information isn't lost. But I do think it is a significant jump. It is really, really a significant jump. Something else as well, a point that should be taken into as well. This year's league and the proximity to championship probably made it of less importance, and there was less at stake. So the games did have more of an exhibition feel to them. They were more relaxed. I think less, no supporters until last weekend meant there was less pressure on people as well. I think referees potentially were more whistle happy as well as a result of, there's not fans there. They're hearing everything. They're hearing every clash. They're hearing every noise. And they're hearing every call from a linesman or from a manager and a selector or whoever. And maybe they're more likely to blow as well. But there's a myriad of factors. But I don't think even all of them combined account for such a big increase.
Yeah, I mean, even the scorelines last weekend were pretty hefty. Clare against Kilkenny 420 to 125. Actually, a couple of the other scores, like the Antrim 223, Laois 122, that's more around what you would have expected. Wexford 25, Dublin 118. Galway put up 325 to Cork's 223. I mean, just a wide open field. Cork are the type of team that lend themselves to high scoring games. Limerick put up 326 against Westmeath, but maybe that's just because of the gulf in the teams. But Waterford 229, Tipperary 321.
Like savage scoring.
It is, yeah. It's savage, but I don't. Yeah. It becomes a small bit tedious when it's constantly ball in, ball out, ball in, ball out. You just want to see teams fighting it out for the ball.
Shane, just a quick point on that. A lot of people would say that the 2014 Drawn All-Ireland final was one of the greatest games ever played, and it was a brilliant game. But like, if anything, I nearly preferred the replay more because it was more of an arm wrestle.
I did.
Yeah, well, obviously you're not going to, obviously. But similarly in, remember Cork beat Clare 16-15 in an All-Ireland semi-final. It was the same year. Galway hit 519 or 518 against Kilkenny. 518 was at the 418, and like everyone was talking about the Galway game, and I preferred the Cork Clare game because it was more physical, less open. So like I still love those games. And if we can find a happy balance, like I don't know what you think, I would still be expecting, like, championship is championship. They're going to be horsing into each other. There's not going to be any space or going to be less space. I still think there'll be high scoring, but I do think it will level off a small bit from the league scores.
Yeah, as Hibernian has commented in here, perhaps less pressure from a lack of crowd accounts a little bit. I do agree with that, and like Joe Canning obviously referenced that in his interview. Another comment in here from Ray Massey: lads, the top teams are at an all-time high standard. Unfortunately, is the gap between these teams and the chasing pack, i.e. Joe McDonough teams, getting even bigger? As a proud Meath man, I'd be worried. And of course, he has seen one of his own Meath compatriots, Jack Fagan, do very, very well with Watford there in the last season or so. You're obviously a Christie Ring Cup, Offaly are in the Christie Ring Cup, and you are one of their former players. Are you concerned, or do you feel like Offaly can actually bridge that gap to re-establish themselves as the Liam McCarthy team in the next 5 years?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, Shane. Like, when, if you're looking back through Offaly's history over the last decade, the last 5 or 6 years, they were competitive at different stages. They looked like they were going to beat any of the bigger teams outside of that win over Dublin in Croke Park. Not really. But I think Antrim are kind of a shining light to a lot of people, and I think Laois should be a shining light to a lot of people as well, with what Laois did in 2019 and with what Antrim are doing in this year's league. So, like, if you get your everything in order, I don't think it's not beyond the realms of possibility. Are Offaly going to get up to the level of a Limerick or a Galway? That is still going to be difficult. Could they possibly get in around 6, 7, 8 over the next 4 or 5 years? I think potentially they could. They've got a good crop coming through, and they're at a good age. But it is difficult to. It's difficult to like, even look at Wexford. Wexford got up to that level 3 or 4 in 2019, and now they're back at probably 7 or 8 at the moment. It is hard to sustain it, but I definitely don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility for the likes of an Offaly. Antrim have done it. Laois could potentially do it. Maybe Kerry, maybe Kildare could come in. Kildare are the sort of side maybe over the next 4 or 5 years that can make massive strides as well. I don't know if they're getting further away. I still think they're as far away as they were 4 or 5 years ago, the top teams.
Really, but athletically, which is something we've talked about the last couple of years, they look far more athletic and like a team that could compete closer to the top level. And it's probably a little false position being in Christie Ring Cup. Obviously, you have to win it to go up and all that, but we know they've already gone up to Division 1 of the league next year, and they look like a team that would certainly be able to compete in the Joe McDonagh this year if they were there.
Yeah, the key thing you said there, whatever about skill-wise, if you can't compete athletically, forget about it. And in fairness to Antrim, they obviously have a nice body of work done over the last 3 or 4 years, because they are competing athletically. They've competed athletically with all the teams they've played. So that's the key thing. If you're miles behind athletically and you haven't got the work done, I would say at development squad level, you're going to be under pressure.
Okay, so keep those comments coming in, and we'll talk all about them. Your player of the league, shock of the league, young gun of the league, score of the league, disappointment league, whatever else it might be. We might and we're also going to get to the Hurling Power Rankings, which of course we haven't really talked about it beforehand, so that's definitely bound to cause a little bit of niggle in here.
Well, given that you have a blue and gold hat on and a sky blue hat on, it could be difficult.
What on earth are you talking about? Yeah, it's lucky for you don't even have to worry about getting your account in there.
Good man. Touche, my friend, touche.
Let's talk about the 2020 London Senior Hurling Championship final. That's going to take place this weekend. It's obviously put back. It's going to be our brother Pierce's against St. Gabriel's. I mean, it's a long time waiting to. I mean, how are these teams even prepared for it? Yeah,
it's difficult enough. I think the November lockdown put paid to them. The November lockdown in the UK put paid to them last year. I think it was originally fixed for May 23rd, but Ruislip was being resurfaced. And I remember chatting the London hurling manager last year, and he was saying like they can't play any sort of competitive game anywhere else, because I think Ruislip is the only GA pitch in the UK at the moment that has ball stoppers, or the only place in London, I should say, that has ball stoppers. So they had to wait for Ruislip to become available again. It's rolling around now. Obviously, over the next couple of weeks and months, we'll have the Laois hurling final and the Offaly hurling final and a couple of other county finals that weren't played. But it's going to be an interesting one. Pierces haven't won it since 1998. I actually did a bit of training with the Pierces. I done a bit of coaching with them in 2015 when I was over in England. It is only when you're stuck in the middle of it that you see the commitments that lads will make to get to training. Like, basically, like if you're a brickie or a electrician or whatever it is, you're literally bringing your gear with you on the tube at 7 a.m. to train wherever it is 7 p.m, and probably get on a tube for an hour and a half. So it is a fair effort, and the social side of it is huge for them over there. I think you probably have been chatting them before as well, but the great Ambrose Gordon, who famously, what did he do? He basically sold a load of videotapes of the Sunday game to every pub over in England. He used to fly over to Dublin every Sunday night, get copies of the Sunday game, fly back to London, and basically had 20 video recorders up on top of each other and put in copies and recorded off 20 copies, and had 4 separate fleets of motorbikes going to all the different pubs in London so that they could watch the Sunday game repeat, and all the expats would be in there watching. He's involved with Gabriel's. He's a book out there recently, a really interesting character. Really interesting character. He'd be involved with Gabriel's, and Gabriel's won it only a couple of years ago. My old clubmate in Burr, Neil Rogers, is the player manager with them as well. They were beaten after, I think it was double extra time, by Robert Emmets 2 years ago. So they'd be mad to get back on the horse. And there's a fair kind of an Offaly element to it. He's the player manager. Owen Kelly, who'd be nephew of John Troy, he plays with Gabriel's as well. And then on the other side, you have Sir Kieran's Conor Kendi, who I think has scored 6 goals in the championship so far. And you have Philip Hogan, who's from just out the road in Dura as well. And like there's a couple of interesting subplots to it as well. Jack Goulding from Kerry, he won a football title. There was one other player on their squad as well, won a football title with Fulham Irish a couple of weeks ago. And then Killian Doyle transferred to Gabriel's last year, and he was one of their most important players to get them to the final. But he's back. Man. Yes, he's back in Ireland now, but technically he's still eligible to play. And you were reading it as well. There was a great preview by Damien Dolan of the Irish Post, and he just said, like, there's doubts about whether Killian Doyle will play. I think he actually picked up a knock as well.
It was in the Irish World, by the way.
Irish World, sorry, yeah. So I don't know if Shane O'Brien would be keen on the possibility of Killian Doyle playing a county final and maybe potentially having to quarantine. I don't pay much attention to what the rules are at the moment or the guidelines are, and whether he's fit or not. So that could be an interesting subplot, whether he lands off a plane into Gatwick or Heathrow or somewhere Sunday morning or Saturday morning and ends up playing that match. But there's lots of interesting subplots to it, and either way, the winners will be celebrating it, even if it's a weird setup now, but at least to be able to celebrate it outside and enjoy it. Whereas if they played in November, they might never be able to enjoy it at all.
Yeah, if anyone has any thoughts on that final, send in your comments or send in your best wishes to the team, and we'll throw them up on screen there. At some point, we're going to have to get to these power rankings, but first off, we'll just go to the player of the league. Who was your player of the league? I'm going to say, God, it's a tough one, but I think Cathal Mannion, the way it just feels like he's taken an extra step up there. I'd also think like the likes of Desi Hutchinson has shown out pretty well too. But there's just something about Cathal Mannion, the way he's scoring with such freedom and regularity and looking like a goal threat, and he just looks so physically strong, and he's a great ball carrier, and there just seems like there's very little that he's not capable of doing this year. So I think just snap decision, I'd be going along the lines of Cathal Mannion.
With the way the game has gone, Shane, with possession based, like he's so good in possession. Like generally, if he gets a shot at goal, he's going to score 9 times out of 10. It's funny, I think this is going to be front loaded with Galway players. One of our viewers sent in Brian Kincannon. Brian Kincannon will be my player of the league. He's just been unbelievable, and he'd be once Galway are out in the championship, he'd be on my fantasy team because he just seems to score 3 to 4 points or 1-2 or 2-2 from play in nearly every game. You're probably looking at a triumvirate of Mannion, Conor Whelan, and Brian Kincannon. I would say if Sean Finn hadn't held Desi Hutchinson so tight when they played Waterford, he'd probably be in there as well, because he got 2-2 the last day against Tipp. He got 1-3 the day before that against Galway. So he's kind of coming to the boil nicely. Stephen Bennett was coming to the boil nicely at the end as well. Well, yeah. It's very easy. It's very easy, and I don't like doing it, but we always tend to focus on forwards, and just wondering if you're looking at backs, if you're looking at defenders or midfield players, who exactly, like off the top of your head, who would come into the equation, because it's so easy focus on the guy that's doing it and putting it over the bar.
Jared Walsh from Antrim comes to mind. Combative full back there. I think he's been very good. And just as I was thinking there, just before you asked me about backs, I was thinking Antrim. I was thinking James McNaughton. He's been very good.
Brilliant.
And there's several Antrim guys you could look at there who've been really good. We didn't mention Tony Kelly. I mean, John Conlon has proved a lot of us wrong. I'm not saying he's a player of the league now or anything like that, but he's been really good. Then looking at Tipperary, few players have done okay. Noel McGrath has showed flashes back in the forward line of how good he can be. I think Barry Heffernan's been brilliant. Really strong performance in shutting down Conor Whelan in particular in one of those games. Waterford, anyone standing out for you in the Waterford backline? Caleb Lyons, as ever, is quite good.
He got sent
Conor
off
Prunty
in the first game, so you couldn't really give him that.
Well, this isn't the AFL best and fairest award. This is just who's been best in the league, and a red card doesn't mean that he isn't impressing massively.
Shane, he got sent off in a game and then missed the game, so he only played 3.5 games, so he can't be in the equation.
Okay, is there anyone who like
put that in a pipe and smoke it?
Okay, well look, Mark Coleman, or did the way it went against Galway? Conor Whelan gave him a rough time when he went out centre forward, snapped that ball over him and knocked him.
Keane Lynch gave him a fair trouble against Limerick too, didn't he?
He did, yeah. So maybe it was one of those things where it looked really good initially, but maybe kind of as time went on, it was a bit more difficult for him. So get your comments in. Let us know. Is there anyone out there or any players that we haven't thought of there that are in that category? I think Dara Gray had a very good league for Dublin. Got plenty of scores from wing back, getting stuck in those games. Owen O'Donnell, very good as well. There's definitely a couple of players that we haven't mentioned. Fintan Burke. So let us know if there's anyone that we haven't touched on. Any shock in the league that you've seen?
I'd go
Antrim beating Clare, I suppose.
Yeah, I'd go on that result. Obviously, I don't like. It wasn't, not saying like it was a massive shock, but it was still a big surprise. It's a big thing to actually go and do it and get a result. And I think it kind of set them up for the league, in fairness. And there was no element of fluke about it. They were, apart from being down a bit early in the first half or midway through the first half, they were neck and neck with Clare nearly the whole way. And pushed over the finish line when they needed to. I'd say the shock of the league would be nearly Antrim overall, Shane, to be honest with you. The fact that they beat Clare, beat Laois, maybe they would have been expected to beat Laois, got a draw with Wexford, and were far from disgraced against Dublin and Kilkenny. So I'd say that's probably the shock, because it is difficult to come up, and it is that you can get a lot of rude awakenings, and that's usually it. You're nearly prepared for being brought back down to earth a few times, and maybe you could say they were against Kilkenny and Dublin to a lesser extent, but their overall campaign to finish mid-table in Group 1B, I think that would have been a shock to a lot of people.
Yeah. Just actually, Colin O'Donnell is after getting in a comment about players that have stood out for him. Cathal Bard from Tipp, best defender. And it's interesting, actually, there was a comment the other day, I just looked at it now while you were talking, from Dublin's Fair City on the Hurling Show from Monday. He said, Shane says Cathal Bard is brilliant, and Verney says Bard is in the form of his life. Really, lads, lofty praise indeed. And when he's well beaten by his man Hutchinson on Sunday, it's all about the ball sent into him, and Barrett gets a free pass. Once his man ever gets ball in hand in any game, it's nearly always a score or free. He's never been a good tackler, and if he doesn't win primary possession, he's sloppy and indisciplined. I think that's quite harsh. And when I say he's brilliant, the amount of 50-50 ball he wins. And Tipperary so badly need lads who can get out in front at the back and have that pace to cover the ground, because Tipperary have some great hurlers, as I've always said, but you can't buy pace like that. Carries the ball into the tackle too often, as far as I'm concerned. Could sometimes just do a give and go hand pass, take it off the next player again, instead of kind of getting held up and maybe sometimes ended up on the ground. But I think he's been overall fantastic. That game against Galway, he got man of the match. So, Dublin's Fair City is right to have his comment too, but obviously Colin O'Donnell is more on my side of things. What are your thoughts?
Dublin's Fair City has never been shy of laying in criticism on anybody, and I felt the brunt of it at different stages.
Oh, well, that's usually about your love of wrestling and Vince McMahon and the rest of that crew.
Do you know what, actually? We actually haven't talked enough about wrestling recently, so I'm going to have to wangle it into this show at some stage. But I do think Barrett's a brilliant defender, I have to say. Probably the only one that would trump him for that, maybe in the cornerback area, would probably be Sean Finn. And it's probably on a point that Dublin's Fair City does make. Sean Finn is brilliant when he doesn't have the ball. Barrett probably isn't as good as Sean Finn when he doesn't have the ball, but I don't think anybody is really. And as you say, I think he wins more. You said he wins more 50-50 ball. I think he wins more 40-60 ball, 30-70 ball than most people. And Colin O'Donnell says there, Barrett has 2 All-Irelands and 2 All-Stars. Enough said. I think he was Young Hurler of the Year at 14 as well. I think aside from him being a cornerback and marking his man, I think he's so important as a sweeper almost across the full back line. And I think particularly if Paddy Matter is going to be full back, Barrett is going to be key to aiding him and, adding a lot of pace into that line. So, I think Barrett's a brilliant defender. While some of it might look last gasp, and maybe, as you say, he does go into the tackle a bit too much. No, I think he's top class defender. And I think if most people are honest, they would have him on their team every day of the week.
Yeah, and obviously we're talking about a Tipperary player there, but we're happy to talk about all counties and all players. So get your comments in, like Jimmy Juice's bar here. Said it once again, Iarla Daly is the man for the day, at the back. And of course, it goes without saying his mother is from Bursley in Tipperary.
I go along with that, Shane, as well. I think he is the solution at number 6, to be honest with you. Like, for a guy to come in when, things could have been at sea in the All-Ireland final last year with Dvorka coming off. And fair enough, he wasn't as influential in the second half. I thought he was brilliant when he came in the first half. And he was so solid the other day against... do you know what? He was better than solid against Tipp and better than solid against Limerick as well. He's able to drive forward, maybe not as comfortable, maybe at taking a pint as Dvorka, but I think his defensive instincts are going to be huge there, particularly if there's any doubt over whether Conor Prunty plays against Clare. I think he's a key man for them at number 6.
Yeah, as far as I know, I think Austin Gleeson is going to be okay for that game against Clare. It remains to be seen. An ankle can be tricky, we know that. But Conor Prunty might be a slightly longer term one. And I wonder if Waterford people or people who are from another county, how they reckon this Waterford backline is going to be lined out the next day. Is it going to be Iarla Daly? Like, Caleb Lyons is certainly going to start. I would imagine Ian Kenny's going to be in there. Shane McNulty may also be in there. Who's like, if Shane Fives isn't right as well, all of a sudden you're really starting to dig into your panel. There's good players there, but there's a reason the likes of Conor Prunty is the captain. He's obviously the guy you want to build that defence around back there. So could Iarla Daly end up a little bit further back, and maybe Kevin Moran slots in at centre back, and maybe Kieran Bennett, for example, wing back. There's probably a player or two I'm forgetting there.
Conor Gleeson be another one, Shane. I think it's key that they moved him from the forward line to the backs, because they just need more options across that back line. He came in the last day, full back, Ramos. They even shortened to Ram. That's all you can hear from the Waterford now. Boy, Ram. I think it's a great name. But he's another option in the defence. And like a couple of years ago, we picked a 7-a-side team. I think me and you, and our best 7-a-side. I think I had Conor Gleeson on it. 3 or 4 years ago. He was a brilliant man marker. Had a couple of tough games and has been a bit riddled with injuries at different times. But I think he's a key option back there as well.
Yeah, Jack Kelly is. There's a comment coming in about Jack Kelly of Laois. He was obviously nominated for an All-Star a couple of years ago in 2019 when Laois had that very good run. Got a couple of points against Kilkenny a couple of games ago in that defeat down in Nolan Park. But I believe he get 4 the last day also against Antrim. So how about Jack Kelly is right. Very, very good player, and somebody that we probably should talk about a little bit more. Myself and Michael Verney, along with Cathal McErlane, are picking our fantasy teams and for the championship, and that's coming out over the weekend. Keep an eye out for that. But we both put him into our team as far as I recollect. So we certainly do rate him. There's no doubt about that.
He's the prototype player, Shane, for if you're able to score from distance now, you want a guy like him. He can nab 3 or 4 points from distance every game.
Yeah, okay. So, young gun of the league.
Yeah, that's the difficult one. Not necessarily young gun, but I thought James Bergen coming in for Kilkenny made a good impact. Had his maybe off moments, but he's making his debut for Kilkenny. Probably got the guts of about 10 or 11 points from play over the course of the league. He was taken off early in one of the games, came back and got 3 or 4 points the next day. We'd seen him in action with Connacht Shamrocks when they won the Junior All-Ireland, and then even last year when they won the Kilkenny Junior. Someone like that now, I'd say, was impressive enough to me. Iarla Daly's young as well, so I'd say he was one of the young guns of the league as well.
Alan Connolly got a couple of goals the first day against Watford, came on against Tipp, did quite well, and I think he got another goal in another game just after that as well. Some people might be able to comment in and just refresh our memories on that. Colin Coughlin coming in wing back for Limerick, that stood out. Shane Barrett also for Cork. Plenty of players there in Kilkenny. Tommy Walsh, I know he's been there, as in the young Tommy Walsh, he's been there for a couple of years. Thought he did all right. Let's see who else. Clare, did anyone stand out massively there?
Mark Rogers. Mark
Rogers,
Mark Rogers good for Clare. Cotton O'Neill for Limerick as well, I'd say, too, coming in the last day.
Ryan Taylor's obviously been there for Clare, in and around the panel in the last while, but I felt he's done okay as well. A couple of the young lads, Gavin Bailey and Conal Flood for Wexford. I'm interested to see if they are tested or if they are played in the championship. I'm not entirely sure they will just yet, but those will be the players. Galway also, you'd have to... Can you include Evan Nyland in that? I mean, he kind of came on the scene last year, but if you're going to include one or two of those others, then maybe he falls
I'd
into
say
this.
you could. He wouldn't have that many games under his belt, competitive games under his belt for Galway, so definitely include him. Sean Loftus has obviously played bits as well, but maybe got more league time now. Could probably include someone like that in it as well.
He's been playing since 2018. He came on the All-Ireland semi-finals.
Yeah, okay, yeah. It's funny, like, did any young player really come true for Tipperary?
Darren Morrissey for Galway as well. Another guy, he was minor captain a couple of years ago and probably making his breakthrough this year. I know he was involved last year, but yeah, he'd made a bit of a breakthrough as well.
Anyone in Tipp? I know you love singing Tipp's praises. Any young player come through?
God, you'll get nothing out of me about Tipperary. You'll get nothing out of me. Well, Paddy Cadell has kind of established himself a little bit more, but it's not his first season. Same with Robert Byrne, but got his red card. Is
there any particular reason why Paddy Cadell comes off so early in games?
Well, he started very well against Watford, but then went out of the game. But I kind of felt that was a symptom of the way Tipperary just blasting the ball long and not just going short and trying to find midfielders and half forwards, which is why most of the middle zone of Tipperary just became bypassed. They just weren't using the ball. Like, for the long ball to work, you need to go short some of the time just to draw out the half back line in the midfield or whatever. So I think that, I mean, maybe players have to stand up and find ways to get themselves in the game, but yeah, probably could have done a little bit more.
Andrew Dunphy would be another one for me, Shane.
Very good for Dublin. Yeah,
because I'd say he's probably nearly my choice, because I wasn't aware of him really before this year's league. And he came in and looks like he potentially could be pushing Paddy Smith out of the team. Jack O'Connor from Cork is a very good one as well. He's been
really good. He
obviously played last year, but he is lightning quick. Like, he rounded Rich English like he wasn't there the last day and finished brilliantly. So he's, like, of the players we've all mentioned, he's young and he's probably definitely going to start championship as well.
Yeah. So we'll move on then to the disappointment of the league. I think for Westmeath, definitely, a scoring differential of minus 106 after 5 games. So you're losing each of those games by an average of 21 points. It was really stacked against them, though. That's the thing. I mean, if they're playing in a normal league, the weather isn't quite as good. So you're obviously playing a different type of hurling. It's probably not as high scoring a hurling. You've obviously mentioned that in a different conversation already. But I just think that how uncompetitive they were. Obviously, they went close in one game against Watford, but that was a much changed team. So this isn't to be critical of them, but just it's disappointing how it went for them.
Yeah, it's not mad to think now that, the McDonagh Cup is coming up and that's huge, but potentially their most important game of the year would be after the McDonagh Cup when they play Laois in that relegation semi-final. Is that the week of is it before one of the All-Ireland semi-finals, I think? Now, Shane O'Brien has been dealt a difficult deck, not alone being in, like, a division that was completely stacked against them, against, higher ranked opposition than in 1B. But it looks like Davy Glennon's probably going to be out for the Joe McDonagh now as well. Killian Doyle, who we've talked about earlier in a different conversation, looks like he's injured too. That's the viewer there, SSRI. Kerry were a massive disappointment. They shipped a huge beating to Offaly, considering they'd had the upper hand on Offaly in recent years, and a huge beating to Carlow in that last game as well. And Shane Conway played that day against Carlow. He mightn't have played against Offaly. So, like, they would have been looking at promotion from 2A up to Division 1. And it's a fine line for Fintan O'Connor now. He's there 5 years. They were in the Division 2A final last year. They weren't close to that this year. Obviously, there wasn't a final played. So the only thing that can save their year is McDonagh Cup success.
I mean, that's a heavy, heavy defeat against Carlow and a bad way to go into the championship. I presume Carlow had some of those injured players back, but losing 325 to 14 points, I mean, 20-point loss there, that's rough going. Now, like, they put up a big score themselves against Wicklow the day before. That's obviously a plus point.
Everybody's been doing that, though, in fairness, Shane. Like, Offaly put up a huge score against an Offaly team that had one starter from the round 4 game against Down, put up a huge score against Wicklow in round 5 against a strong Wicklow team. So Kerry, we talked about the proximity between league and championship, to turn it around that quickly. And they're playing down in their first game. Now, they beat Down in the league already, but essentially, if they don't get a victory over Down, they're under big pressure, because it's the top team. There's 2 groups of 3 in the McDonagh. You play everybody in your group once, so you play 2 games. So if they lose to Down, they're essentially gone. If Down beat Meath in that other game. So that's a huge game.
Yeah. Would you be disappointed in Laois's performance? I mean, Cheddar's had a huge amount of injuries. I mean, that's life for a lot of teams. He's got a couple of lads back, the likes of PJ Scully and Chad Dwyer. But, 5 defeats from 5, competitive in some of the games. But, it does feel like the progress, not that the progress is slipping or that it's nothing to do with Cheddar per se, but it does feel like they reached a certain peak, and I'm not sure if they're going to get back there. Whereas, whatever it is about Antrim at the moment and the athletic look of a lot of their players, I feel like they can continue with the upward trend.
Yeah, it's a funny one with Laois. And I know Cheddar was on the record saying that they were really chasing physical fitness, like that they were behind. He was essentially saying that they were probably, having to front load an awful lot of work, even the weeks of league games, important league games. I think the positive aspect for them is that they were coming good towards the end. They obviously didn't beat Antrim in that last game, but they were only beaten by 4 points. They were pushing hard against Kilkenny in the second half. So I think they'll be reasonably optimistic. The first 3 games were very disappointing. There's no point in saying any different. If we're talking about disappointments in the league, I suppose the fact that conversations over the first couple of rounds were so dominated by the disadvantage rule and so dominated by the amount of frees and the amount of scores from frees, and even, as we talked about earlier in another discussion, the just how high scoring games are and just how it's maybe a bit too much like ping pong. But at least I think things definitely leveled off after the first 2 weeks, and the games were much better. Like, I was down at Tipp and Waterford in the last round, and while it was a real high scoring game, there were some absolute flashes of brilliance in it as well, that maybe we hadn't seen in earlier weeks. And just something that we didn't talk about on the scoring rates as well, the goal rate has actually gone up. The goal rate in the league was as high as it's been in 10 years, which is a good sign. So we've talked about like green flags maybe not been raised, potentially, and I was one of the naysayers, but it does look like the cynical rule has aided that as well. Like, how many sin bins have we seen throughout the league? I'd say max 5 or 6. I'd say over the whole of Division 1, which is good, and that means that defenders realise it's such a big thing to do, and it can have such disastrous consequences that they don't do it. And as a result of that, maybe forwards are getting an easier goal, and we're going to see more goals.
Yeah, a big disappointment of mine was that there weren't much bigger crowds allowed in now, and obviously that a lot of the games had no crowds, because some of the ridiculous restrictions that we've had in Ireland, and we are an outlier in terms of the world. I mean, look at the Euros at the moment, and our experiments, as if Ireland needs to run their own experiments in everything to see if we can do something or not. Just look abroad, find out what they're doing. Like, we're getting 2,400 people going in to see Offaly against Derry in the league final this weekend, something like 2%, maybe 3% of the capacity. I think the Euros, every game is at least 20 or 25%, and then there's obviously much more at a couple of other games as well. Like, I've gone to games and they've been damn squibs. I was at Wexford Kilkenny, and great venue, 2 teams. I think Wexford were selling as a pup that day with the way they set up and the way they played, and they looked like a jaded team. I was at Clare versus Dublin as well. These are games that would be hothouse environments if crowds were allowed go. And we know outdoors is just ridiculously safe. Like, look at the crowds that are gathering in Dublin on the canals for weeks upon weeks upon weeks, and still cases aren't going up. It was all about flattening the curve. And as of yesterday, there was 19 people in ICU. So stopping people from doing stuff outdoors, and we'll have all the protocols, people maybe stagger showing up to the grounds and all that kind of stuff. It's been done across the world. Let's just figure out what they're doing and get far more people in, because this abundance of caution, and then you see some of the video that came out of Neffet during the week with spoiling the antigen testing. It's just so frustrating, and everything like that should be questioned. So I'm just so disappointed with that, because it's robbing people, good GAA people, of going and seeing the thing that gives them pleasure in life, especially when so much of the last 15, 16 months has been absolutely ruined on them. The fact that we can't just say, right, okay, outdoors are safe, how can we make this work? That's so disappointing to me. And I'd love to know what our viewers think.
Yeah, it's just hard to get your head around, an 82,000 seater stadium, or like Croke Park, or to go to 50 in Thurles. Like, Jesus, you could have 10,000 in Croke Park so safely. You could have 20,000 in there nearly so safely at this stage. It does beggar belief at this stage. I've never seen some sort of a speedway thing over in America, and there was 100,000 people at the event. Like, it's just we are very, very slow to do things and to react. We should be really our pilots should be what's going on in other countries. That should really be the pilot.
Yeah, and fair enough, every country is different, and everyone's got like more dense populations or more sparsely populated areas. Some have more vaccinations, others don't. But this is outdoor stuff, and we can look at what's happening all around the world and figure out what can we do to move forward, rather than let's shut everything down and have this big, massive nanny state, and let's all deify one person and let all the politicians hide behind him. It's just absolutely the pits as far as I'm concerned. So that's my disappointment.
For elections, Shane. You'll be running for local elections next time, I'd say.
Yeah, and South Dublin is open there at the moment. I could have stuck my head in the door and said, "Boys, how are you fixed for an old politician down this neck of the woods?" Okay, so that's my disappointment in the league. If anyone else has any other thoughts on the league that stood out to them, it doesn't have to be from those particular categories. Let us know. You actually wanted to talk about the inter-county commitments, and obviously Dublin's Paul Mannion, or formerly of Dublin, Paul Mannion. He was talking this week about stepping away from the inter-county scene for this year, and he said, we talk all the time about the commitment inter-county players give, and it's a really big commitment. You can't do it forever, and it just got to the point where I've been doing it for a fair number of years, and I just wanted to spend time on other things. Bad news travels fast, and you'd often see the bad news will be out there.
That's not Paul Mannion now. That's Gordon Kelly at the bottom.
Oh, there. Sorry, you take it away there. Yeah, Gordon Kelly of Clare.
I was chatting to Gordon Kelly, the former Clare footballer. He gave unbroken service. I think it was 06 to 2020, and I was just asking
David Clifford said he was a very, very difficult player to be marked by.
I think he earmarked him as the most difficult. He said he was astute at the dark arts of the game, and as you need to be playing cornerback, and you definitely need to be marking David Clifford. But I was just
higher compliment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was asking him about like the inter-county and what did he make of the commitment, and he thought the commitment was overstated. He just said you'd hope that any young fella that has the opportunity will go in and play inter-county. It's one of the best things that anyone can do. Sometimes I think the commitment is overstated. People don't spend enough time talking about the benefits of playing inter-county, the access to the best coaches, best strength and conditioning, best physios, the best setup, etc. So really, you'd love to see young lads trying their hardest to go in onto a panel, because playing for your county is one of the best things you can actually do. Then he just said about how when the likes of Mannion talk about the heavy commitment, or anybody says, inter-county game has gone too far, he just said, bad news travels faster, and you'd often see the bad news will be out there saying that's too much of a commitment and stuff like that. But if you talk to players, they're going out there 4 or 5 nights a week and meeting up with good friends. They're playing football and have a bit of fun while living a healthy lifestyle. They're there because they enjoy it, and the healthy lifestyle and the positive aspects of playing inter-county football should be promoted more. I think we are all guilty of sometimes the negative thing is a bit more, salacious almost, and it catches people's eyes a bit more. But I do think it's important to put that out there. Like Gordon Kelly, they obviously won the Division 4 and Division 3 leagues, but aside from that, maybe wouldn't have had too much success throughout his Clare career. And here you have someone saying like it's the best thing I ever did. It's interesting. Michael Dignan was talking recently, the Offaly chairman, and he said that what the mantra and the culture he's hoping to set up in Offaly is that when everybody retires, that they'll say that was the best 15 years of my life. I can never get that back. That was the best 15 years of my life. He said, that's what I think when I think of my playing career. And I want other lads to experience that now. I think a lot of it with the heavy commitment, it can be very military-like. And if you take the fun and the crack out of something and you're kind of dragging your arse going to training, it's very, very difficult. But if you can mix, and it seems like Colin Collins is very good to do it. Definitely, I know that John Motton has been good to do it with the Offaly footballers and lots of other managers as well. If you just can mix that fun enjoyment element, that's why you're there. That's why you go training with Coola 3 or 4 nights a week. That's why I go training with Burr, because we enjoy it, and that should never be forgotten. And I think that's the most important thing, that while it can be a heavy commitment at times, you have to offset the heavy commitment and what I actually get out of it. How much do I love doing this? How much do I love the crack of going in amongst lads in training, going out for drinks or whatever after matches, the crack of, at training the next night, you know, saying Jesus X, Y, or Z was in an awful state the other night. Did you see what he did or whatever? Like that's half of it really, and I think we need to be careful that we don't go too far away from that. While it is a heavy commitment, you have to remember why you're there, and you're there doing it because you love it.
Yeah. No, you don't want at a stage where players have to commit 30 or 40 hours a week, which, you know, that came out with some of those reports before. You don't want that, but you need a nice balance, and players obviously trying to get better all the time and enjoying trying to take themselves on to the next level. Couple of comments in here. Kevin O'Sullivan, fair play, Shane, well said. He's obviously talking about the restriction stuff. You'd have my vote, and I'm a Galwegian. Jeez, that's saying something. Peter Cleary, Caleb Lyons has played full-back on Shanahan before and did well, or it could be Conor Gleeson. I don't know if Conor Gleeson's size profile would match up too well with Aaron Shanahan. Even last year, Shanahan caused wreck against Conor Prunty in that game down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh in the All-Ireland quarter-final, scored 2 goals, set up another one if I remember correctly. I think.
Can I just say something, Shane? I cannot wait for that game. Genuinely,
it's going to be class.
I think that is going to be an absolute belter, and I think the opening weekend of games, I'm really looking forward to Dublin Antrim in particular, and I think Clare and Waterford could be an absolute belter. I think you have 2 teams coming in really good form as well. Clare have turned the corner. Waterford look like they could put up ridiculous scores. They have this freestyle forward line almost. I think that could be an absolute belter of a game.
Is Tony Kelly actually player of the year of the league so far?
He missed time as well, I would say. I think he sat out 2 games.
He did at the start, but what he did when he came in was just ridiculous.
What he did was phenomenal. And I suppose when you look at that Waterford-Clare game, you're thinking Kelly was only on the field, or he was still on the field, but he was injured last year. And you wonder, how much more of a force would Clare have been if he'd been fully fit? So
yeah, actually,
I'd love to see a fully fit Kelly going up against a fully fit Caleb Lyons. That's a tantalising one now.
Yeah, actually, I almost missed this comment from Patrick Hickey. He's a Clare man. Best player, Dermot Ryan, Clare. Best score, Tony Kelly goal versus Kilkenny. And then biggest disappointment was Wexford. And they were very disappointing. I mean, I went down to Nolan Park thinking I'm going to get a right good game here between Kilkenny and Wexford, and it was a damn squib, to say the least. It was absolutely putrid.
Fair point on Dermot Ryan, Shane. Fair point on Dermot Ryan.
He's been very good.
Like a guy that had played wing forward. Like you're looking at converted full forward to centre back in Conlon, converted half forward to wing back in Dermot Ryan. And if anything, I've said it before, I think he offers more going forward at wing back than he does at wing forward.
Okay, we've saved the best to last, the coup de grace, the hurling power rankings. We haven't done one in 2021. We did them last year and we caused a little bit of consternation. And I'd like to think we'll cause a bit of consternation again. But we have obviously been putting this off. So will we Han Mush? Is that to you? I suppose it is.
Yeah, that's Alan Owens from. He's a Wicklow man who's running the show in Borough underage hurling and football. They actually won the under 13 football title there the other day. So fair play to him. On the Mush, the Mush is anyone from around Borough would know that's very parochial in our parish.
Like you often hear of someone's mush as their face. Is that what that's about?
No, I think it's actually a Romany gypsy term. You'd actually hear Delboy saying it in Only Fools and Horses a good bit as well, but it's totally stuck on in Borough. I actually was part of a video many moons ago. The video was called The Origin of Mush, and it was interesting to hear different people's stories.
No doubt there's massive views on YouTube for that.
There is actually. It's not bad actually.
By the way, just a reminder that we're brought to you by Torpy and the Bamboo Hurley. If you want to get 10% off that, go to their website. The link is in the description underneath the video. Put in the promo code OurGame. Right, let's just go straight into the power rankings.
Top or bottom? Are we starting top or bottom?
I'd say we'll start off at the top. We'll go through consternation. We'll get towards the bottom, and then we'll obviously try to have to meet somewhere in the middle. Will we just start off with the most obvious one? Limerick number 1, yeah?
There's nothing to suggest from the league, as particularly the way it finished, that they're not still the standard bearers.
Galway number 2.
I don't think you could have anybody else number 2. From what we've seen in the league, they obviously beat Limerick during the league as well. So I don't think you could have anybody else number 2, to be honest with you.
Yeah, get your comments in here and help us. I mean, just maybe I should have gone with Tipp number 1, shouldn't I?
To be honest with you, if anybody disagrees with Limerick 1 and 2, I'd nearly be worried. Unless they're putting Galway 1, Limerick 2, potentially. But I don't, it'd be hard pressed to disagree with those two being the top 2.
Yeah, and the criteria is open. It's all about all the different factors in there, what they've done in the past, where you think they're going, how do you think these teams would match up if they're playing against each other. Like styles make fights. Some people might think that Tipperary would struggle against Limerick, but Tipperary would beat Cork, and yet Cork might struggle against Tipp, but they could go on and beat Limerick. So let us know what you think. Who do you think should be at the top? And Michael Verney has dropped off there, which is absolutely handy when you're in the middle of a live video. But I'm going to blast on with my power rankings in the meantime. I'm going to put, so the next teams in the ranking there. So you've got Galway, and Limerick as 1 and 2. I'm going to go and put Tipperary in as number 3 just yet. That mightn't suit absolutely everybody, but I'm going to go with it anyway. And I think then you've got the likes of Cork, Waterford, Kilkenny. So out of those, I'm definitely going to need people to get comments in here to help me out, because that's a tough one to go with. I think at the moment, based on last year's All-Ireland semi-finals, I think you'd have to put Waterford in at number 4. As I said, help me out here now, because I'm flying solo. I think at number 5, so this comes down to who do I think could win between Cork and Waterford. Like Wexford are obviously in this conversation as well, just not 100% sure based on their form last season when they lost their two championship games by 22 points in total. And even in 2019, they were Leinster champions and pushed Tipperary pretty far. But
what happened there, Shane? I'm not quite sure what happened, but I'm presuming you put Tipp in number 3 in my absence.
No, I actually rejigged the whole thing. It's now Tipp, Limerick, go. So you went off there. I've been flying solo for the last minute or two. Did your mammy ring you or something and interrupted the line?
No, I don't actually know what happened, to be honest with you. There's no incoming calls or anything like that. But I'm adamant that Waterford are number 3, though.
You're adamant ahead of Tipperary?
Yeah.
Well, I had them penciled in thinking, I mean, sure, this is a no-brainer. Like Waterford haven't beaten Tipperary in the championship for 13 years. You surely wouldn't dare make that call.
Are we going on like recent form? I think they beat Tipperary there last week, and they got to an All-Ireland final and Munster final last year, whereas Tipperary were beaten in the Munster semi-final and beaten in an All-Ireland quarter-final.
League is league.
Well, I'm talking about last year's championship as well.
They didn't beat us in the championship last year.
No, but they got much further than you.
Yeah, but huh?
They were also beaten by much less against Limerick when they played them in the Munster final too than you were.
So do you think this year, if Tipperary and Waterford meet in the championship, that Waterford will win?
I do, actually.
Go away.
I do, yeah. I think Waterford will get to the Munster final this year again, yeah.
Well, Jimmy Juice's borrows a regular comment, and keep them coming. He says, I'd have to agree with Verney. Desha at number 3. I
think I know it was only one game, but I really liked what I saw against Tipp the last day. There were glimpses of it against Galway. Iarla Daly was obviously missing against Galway. Gleeson was centre back. I think he's key. If they have Prunty available and Gleeson's available, they will be Clare. Yeah, I think they will be Tipp. Yeah.
Oh, I'm aghast. I'm not agreeing with this. I'm not going with it just yet. But let's see what Pádraig Hurley has to say.
Come on, Pádraig. Tipp 5. Go on, you boya.
Wow. Waterford 3, Kilkenny. Obviously, Leinster is weaker than Munster, and I'm sure that's why he's going for that. Kilkenny 4, Tipp 5, Cork 6. Tipp can't be 3 as the team hasn't moved on at all. Too many of the older lads will still play.
Can you tell me, Shane, and there were some like bright points of the league for Tipperary, definitely. But, like, where do you see them at now? Like, I'll put it this way. Is Pádraig Matter going to be playing fullback in the championship? Something, I must say, off the record or not, that you said would not happen in this year's championship when he was playing there against Cork. Like, have they moved on from last year?
I think they've rejigged, certainly. I mean, Pádraig Maher was wing back last year, and sometimes I think he might have been the sweeper the odd time. But, yeah, he's gone to fullback. Remains to be seen how it goes. I think there's certainly mismatches that can happen there. And this is the thing, like all players have to have pace and everything. They basically have to be able to tick every sort of a box these days. But one thing you absolutely need is pace, because that will be found out very, very quickly. Have Tipperary moved on? Well, I like seeing Seamus Kennedy centre back because he's got that pace to sweep in and around. But part of me would nearly rather see Ronan Maher play full back. Part of me would like to see, I can understand why Barry Heffernan would be cornerback marking the travelling corner forward. But I'd like to see him in the half back line as well. Paddy Cadell, midfield, if they actually try and work the balls through the line, I think that's a progression for this year. If they play Jake Morris inside rather than outside and they pin good ball into him and Callan, I can see that being dangerous. Michael Breen is still being used out of position as far as I'm concerned, not getting the sort of shake out of him that you'd like. Noel McGrath's back up to centre forward. He was obviously looked at jaded player last year after playing 12 weeks in a row or something with Lockmore. John McGrath, the same. I don't know if Tipperary have moved on all that much. You know, it's probably a fair point. I still think if Tipperary hit the ground running, that Tipperary can beat any team there, probably with the exception of Limerick. So that's why I would actually make a case for tip number 2. But if you were to say between two very close teams, Galway and Tipperary, who have made more progress in 2021 and who has more pace and balance and that sort of stuff, I'd say Galway have taken a little bit of a step away. So that's why I'm completely comfortable with Limerick 1, Galway 2, and then I'm comfortable with Tipperary 3.
I don't understand. Fair enough, they're 2019 All-Ireland champions by default, in my opinion. But
hold on now, 1 second now. You're cutting the back off a great county and an unbelievable All-Ireland win, hammering Kilkenny in the All-Ireland final, of course.
14-man Kilkenny.
Who made him get sent off?
What was I going to say to you? I think there's loads of potential in Tipp, and I think that this is going to sound silly, but I think there could be dark horses. You know what I'm saying by dark horses, because Limerick are such strong favourites and Galway are almost such strong second favourites that Tipp nearly are seen as dark horses, and they could well, you know, go very, very well. But I think based on what we've seen this year, like they've been quite defence-minded in nearly all their games up until probably the Waterford game. I just haven't seen enough. I didn't see enough in last year's championship. On all known form that we have over the past 7 months, I haven't seen enough.
Yeah, you couldn't see much there during the 6 months of the country being shut down. It was hard to show too much. But Watford are down players. I mean, if Conor Prunty is out, and I'm not entirely sure how long he'll be out. Tyke de Burke is out for the season. We haven't seen Pádraig Mahoney just yet. Shane Fives has picked up a knock as well. Look, I'd be pushing hard to have Tipperary ahead in the pecking order here. If we can get a few other comments in and people let us know, is it Tipp, is it Waterford, who's ahead between those two? And there's other counties as well that have to come into the reckoning here. Jimmy Juice's bar again. I honestly think Tipp have a better chance against Limerick than Galway from the type of hurling the two sides play. Don't know if I agree with that. Kevin O'Sullivan, Limerick followed by Galway. Tipp third after a showing against Galway. Tipp plays a lot of stock on their matches against Galway in the league. Waterford very close to Tipp with players in form. Who's the team that nobody wants to face? Now there's a question. Who's the team?
An in-form Cork, I would say, is the team that not too many people want to face.
But that's if their game plan works of working the ball out from the back. Like I think Cork would beat Tipperary quicker than Waterford would beat Tipperary, but I would still put Waterford ahead of Cork in the pecking order here.
It's like you're talking in riddles almost.
I know. Well, for a clown like you, it certainly would be.
Sorry, can you just repeat what you said? No.
You know the way we often say, I think Cork have a better chance against Limerick than Tipperary do, but I think Tipp could beat Cork. Similarly here, I think Tipperary would beat Waterford quicker than they'd beat Cork, but I would fancy Waterford to beat Cork.
I tell you what, Shane, I think you're underestimating Waterford to some extent. I think Waterford bring a crazy pace to the table. I think Waterford would frighten that Tipp defence. I genuinely do. And
that's if Tipp play the same way as they did the other day.
Yeah, well, I think the matchups would still have to be really, really on the money from a Tipp point of view. Saying that, like, obviously Seamus Callan's going to come back into more form over the next, 3 weeks. You're expecting more from them, but yeah, I'd be adamant that Waterford are 3 from what I've seen. I think they were one of the teams that probably learned most from the league as well, and saw what failed and saw what they needed to remedy. And I think I genuinely think like Iarla Daly's so important centre back. I think it's. I don't think I'm overstating it. Maybe I am. But I just think he's a huge player for them there.
Yeah, and Waterford though were 10 points to 5 down against Limerick, and it wasn't until the red card to Seamus Flanagan that things turned around a little bit. It kind of feels like we've glossed over Limerick a little bit, and we're not paying them their dues, but we're putting them number 1. We know all the class they have, and the same with Galway as well. Like even last year, they pushed Limerick to within 3 points. But it looks like they've kicked on a bit. But maybe Limerick have too. But I still feel like it's Tipperary next. Keep getting the comments in because we will kind of have to fix on the order at some point here. Where are you putting Cork and Kilkenny in here?
I would probably I'd have Waterford 3, Tipp 4, Kilkenny 5. I'd say. You have to remember Kilkenny were playing in the weaker of the two divisions. In one of the real competitive games, you would have been expecting them to beat Antrim. And you would have been expecting them to beat Laois. They were beaten by Clare in the last game.
And I thought there were signs of like they were poor in certain aspects. Adrian Mullen going off injured didn't help, nor did Wally Walsh, who looked like he was on top of the ground again. Maybe not as good last season. But yeah, I think there's certain frailties in that Kilkenny team. And if TJ Reid doesn't catch fire, which is going to be hard to do at the age of 33 in a breakneck speed championship, but I could still put them ahead of Cork because Cork just don't seem to be able for it against Kilkenny.
Well, I put it to you this way: if you're looking at from a betting prospect of knowing what you're going to get out of those two counties, I think you know what you're going to get out of Kilkenny. Generally, you still probably don't know out of Cork. From a Kilkenny point of view, conceded 4 goals against Clare. David Reedy walked through, the centre of defence, which was very, very worrying. Still not sure, there could be any one of 4 or 5 players playing cornerback, be it Tommy
or
Walsh, be it Tommy Walsh, Kieran Wallace, Joey Holden, Conor Delaney, Paddy Deegan. Like there's a lot of guys there. There's not that solidity or consistency that we would normally think of with Kilkenny. Where does Killian Buckley play, if at all? Who partners? Probably Conor Fogarty at midfield.
Richie
it's
Lahey
still up
maybe.
In the air.
Yeah, yeah, it's very much up in the air. It could be Richie Lahey. So I don't think we're fully settled on that. I think we're still trying to figure it out as we go here. Paul Scully says Clare could be a difficult team. No matter who they play in Munster, they'll be the underdog this year, and the team are knitting together nicely for Lohan. That is very, very true. I think the people of Clare are very much behind Lohan, and they're playing like a well-knit unit. They don't seem to leave themselves exposed all over the field. Very impressed against Dublin, very impressed against Kilkenny as well. But I actually think there's more in them because sometimes their use of the ball isn't as good as it could be. They don't get Aidan McCarthy and Tony Kelly into the game as often as they might. So, do you think, like after what they did the other day against Kilkenny, why are Clare beneath Kilkenny here?
I suppose Kilkenny won Leinster last year, got to an All-Ireland semi-final last year.
But they're in a handier province.
Fair point, Jed. They were probably closer to Waterford than Clare were in last year's championship as well. And Clare were beaten obviously in their first game. What did they win? Clare won 3 games in the league, I think, didn't they? No, they were beaten by Wexford. They won
3 and lost 2.
Yeah, beaten by Wexford and beaten by Antrim. Like, in fairness, Kilkenny had 4 wins at the end of the campaign. Yeah,
Clare threw it away against Wexford. They were up by a nice few points, red card to Liam Corrie, and then Wexford did very well to turn it around later on. By the way, actually, Rory O'Connor, another player who was absolutely brilliant in the league, and we didn't really talk about him. So we're going to put...
I'd be worried, Shane. I'd be worried if I was the Waterford lads. I think Waterford are on top of the ground, and I think they're flying. But Clare are coming into that game in a serious position, and they're coming in really good form. That's why I literally can't wait for the opening weekend. I think that's going to be an absolute cracker of a game.
Are Clare ahead of Cork here, or do Cork get the nudge?
No, I'd still probably have Cork ahead of Clare, based because they played in Division 1A and produced a couple of big results, but they did tail off a bit towards the end, which is a worry. I tell you what, it's put you this way, and I said the same on Kilkenny. If you're putting Clare and Cork up against each other, I think I have a fair idea what I'm going to get from Clare each day. I'm still not sure what I'm going to get from Cork. So, that's a flip flop there for me, probably.
So, are we putting Clare ahead of Wexford based on the championship game last year when Tony Kelly destroyed them? And maybe this year, if they hadn't to go down to 14 men, it felt like that they were playing a better hurling. So if they were to meet in championship, I would be going with Clare here.
I'd be going the same, Shane. Yeah, I haven't seen much from Wexford this year to suggest that they're going to make a big charge. Maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen enough. And that first half performance in Kilkenny was atrocious.
Are Wexford ahead of Dublin though?
100%. Dublin are down near the... Shane, we're going through 11 teams here, and Dublin are either 10 or 11.
Well, so you're suggesting that either Antrim or Laois are ahead of them?
I surely am, yeah. Antrim finished ahead of them in the league on 5 points, and Dublin were on 4 points.
Yeah, but like when they played each other, like Dublin, no, I think certainly Dublin are ahead of both Antrim and Laois here. Well, look, I think Laois are going to be 11th out of 11 here. I don't think there's too much debate on that. We're putting Wexford at 8, and then for me, Dublin are absolutely ahead of Antrim. I don't see any kind of question of that at the moment.
Okay, you're basing what you're saying on the head-to-head when they played each other. That's
to mention the last few years that Dublin have showed they can compete regularly against the top counties, whereas Antrim are going in out of nowhere really to see how they can get on.
Fair point. Antrim obviously beat Clare, drew at Wexford. They beat a Clare team that beat Dublin quite well. They drew with a Wexford team that beat Dublin quite well, and they beat Laois. So fair enough. I think there's a case could be made for Antrim at 9, coming in much better form. Won 2A last year, won the McDonagh last year, and finished ahead of Dublin in the league.
I've no doubt that they're on a really strong trajectory in the right way, and they have a lot of skill, a lot of quality. But I think Dublin are a bit more seasoned at this level. I think Keane Boland can do a bit of damage against them. I think he's a very good player, as I've said before. Ronan Hayes, I think, can. Danny Sutcliffe's in good form. If Dublin get their strongest team out, I can, like Owen O'Donnell, I think he gave Antrim a torrid time from full back the first. It was a funny thing to say about a full back giving the opposition a torrid time. But to me, I find it strange that you're pushing this argument so hard. To me, Dublin are certainly ahead of Antrim, and I think they'll prove that in the championship.
I think you have two teams going in a different trajectory. I think Dublin are going downwards since 2019. I think Antrim are going upwards. And I think Antrim have a serious shout at a shock. And that's why I cannot wait for that opening weekend.
But you said that in the league. Like you said, I think Antrim win this game. And I said Dublin are definitely going to win it.
Yeah, good man. Fair play to you. Well done for predicting that probably the 1 to 5 favourites won the game. Congratulations on that. The championship game is the game that really matters.
Okay, let's look at some of the other comments. Stephen Mahan says Limerick 1, Galway 2, Tipp 3, Waterford 4, Clare 5, Kilkenny 6, Cork 7, Wexford 8, Dublin 9, Antrim 10, and he hasn't even bothered with Laois, which is obviously going to be tough to take. Alan Owens, your buddy again. No team will want to go into either Ennis or travel to Antrim. Both are banana skin teams for the so-called stronger teams. SSRI, there's 6 teams in the chasing pack to Galway and Limerick with very little between any of them just now.
But that's a very fair point, Shane, and that's why it is it could be an interchangeable feast. Tipp, Kilkenny, Cork, Clare, probably Clare just a maybe off, but those 3, 4, 5 are really interchangeable pieces.
Yeah, and yet Tipperary seem to do pretty well against a lot of these teams regularly, and you're putting them all together and you're just ignoring track record in recent years and the All-Ireland medals in the back pocket. But I suppose that'd be you, all right?
Shane, I ignored them in 2019 and ended up All-Ireland champions, so you should be happy enough.
Yeah, so Don Davern, Clare consistency kills them. SSRI, Antrim v Dublin.
I'm not sure about that, Don, to be honest with you. Clare started slowly in the league, and that's fair enough, but I thought they were consistent enough throughout it. Like, outside of that result, Liam Curry getting sent off, they would have beaten Wexford. They would have had 4 wins out of 5, so I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, Kevin O'Sullivan, Waterford's injuries will be crucial. Hopefully they're not having another 2018 in that regard, and everything did go against them that year.
None of them are that serious. That's the only thing I'd say. They all have a good shot at being back.
Yeah, Jimmy Juice is bar now. He's backing you here.
Go on, Jimmy.
Offaly are clearly back, lads. Will we not put them in around 9 or 10? No, fierce improvement.
I wish we could. I'd say we'd be lynched if we put a Christy Ring Cup team in ahead of anybody in the top 10.
Well, if anyone had the ignorance to try it, it might be you.
No. If the boot was on the other foot, I'd say you would try it. I never forget. I was you know the way the pubs were open before Christmas there, and I was in the pub one of the nights, and a couple of young lads came up to me and said, "What is that Stapleton lad at? You were picking an all-star team there, and you tried to put Seamus Callan on it last year, and that's just typically you."
I am the most impartial man you'll meet. So now, about getting Tipperary back up to number 3.
To be honest with you, I don't know. I still have Waterford at 3, and the only way probably to decide it is for the people to decide it. You know what I mean? Because I'm not going to budge on Waterford 3. I'm really impressed. I've been really impressed with Waterford, particularly towards the latter stages of the league. And I think they've a good shot getting to a Munster final again.
Do you think Kilkenny fans can feel a little bit aggrieved here? I mean, I think in the last couple of years, Waterford beat them in the semi-final last year. There was those couple of collapses against Dublin where they obviously saw the game out, and against Waterford to lose that semi-final. 2019, obviously beaten heavily enough in the All-Ireland final. You've obviously mentioned the red card as a Kilkenny fan yourself, despite being from Offaly. But I don't think we can make a case from them being ahead of Waterford or Tipp just here. But that doesn't mean I don't think that they could beat either of those teams.
Yeah, and
obviously they beat Galway last year, they are Leinster champions, so it kind of forget that.
They've beaten the 1 and 2 in the last 2 championships.
And yet we're putting them down at 5.
Yeah, but the only thing I say is that, Shane, do I think Kilkenny can win the All-Ireland? I honestly don't. Do I think they could beat somebody along the way that is a serious All-Ireland contender? Potentially. But I don't think they can string 3 or 4 together. I don't think they have the quality. And I think, Shane, if Kilkenny people are saying that they should be 3 or 2 or 1, I think expectations need to be reduced a small bit in Kilkenny. To me, I'm not sure if I don't think the quality is there to win All-Ireland.
You have me heartbroken here. I think we more or less we agree, and there's a couple of little sticking points here. As far as I'm concerned, Tipp are 3, Waterford are 4, and Dublin are 9, and Antrim are 10. Everything else we seem to agree on. So are you going to meet me halfway? Look, if Tipp meet Waterford in the Munster semi-final, who's going to win that game?
Waterford.
Really?
Yeah. Oh no, I know you're saying Waterford haven't beaten them. The goal, aside from the ghost goal, they would have beaten them in 18. Would you admit that at least?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's part of your argument.
Yeah, but I mean the result, they didn't get over the line.
Shane, there's a really difficult question. There's a really difficult conundrum coming for you here. You're either going to have to give way on your native Tipperary or your new home in Dublin. One of them is going to have to give. Either Antrim are going to have to go ahead of Dublin, or Waterford are going to have to go ahead of Tipp. One or the other.
No. I couldn't give ground on either of them.
Well, then I hope people are ready to stay tuned into this evening.
Yeah, we're going nowhere. Rolling coverage here, hurling power rankings until the championship throws in.
Okay, Shane, I'll put it to you this way. There's probably more evidence to have Waterford at 3 than to have Antrim at 9.
Yeah, I would accept that there's probably, you can make a stronger case. I don't believe your case at all for Antrim being ahead of Dublin, even though they're on the upward curve, no doubt about it. Tipperary a little bit, yeah. I've talked about Tipperary and some of the weaknesses there, even though the potential, I think, is there to beat everyone except Limerick, judging on how things are going at the moment. I don't agree with it, but I'll accept it. So we'll go with that. So
this is magic.
Yeah,
magic.
So Limerick, Galway, Waterford, Tipp, Kilkenny, Cork, Clare, Wexford, Dublin, Antrim, Laois. So that's it. That's our hurling power rankings. That was tough going. Hey,
don't show your face around Bursley for a couple of weeks. Don't show your face around Bursley for a couple of weeks until maybe Tipp have done enough to be justified being in 1 or 2, I'd say.
Yeah. Right, that's it from the Hurling Show. As you know, we're brought to you by Bamboo, the new hurley from Torpy. I'll get some strike out of that, and you can get 10% off the hurley by going to the website, which is in the video description, and using the promo code OurGame. I think a couple of more comments have come in right at the dead here. Great selection, lads, in fairness. And Alan Owens, definitely Statler and Waldorf stuff now, boys. So that's about the height of it. Thank you very much, Michael Verney. We'll be chatting again soon.
Thanks a million, chat.
The Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpy website and in the link below, and enter the promo code OurGame to get yourself 10